Floosh, Chisan, Kanui Masaiga, Tot George Chakwa. I'd like to say thank you for everyone that reached out to me after our first episode. I'm coming to you out of George's house, which is where we will be seeing each other from now on, as we all practice, social distancing, keep your 6 feet over there, wash your hands, make sure you're staying at home. Did you know that in my town, you can walk through the drive-thru right now? Isn't that weird? Anyway, today's George Jake of the Day is brought to you again by George, because it turns out I'm out of printer ink. So you can see the kid winner of our Jake of the Day somewhere below or somewhere on the YouTube channel. Kids are smart. You'll figure it out. My Jake of the Day is brought to you on the back of a pizza box because I am out of paper. So, if you're out of paper or don't have paper at your house, you can do things like draw on boxes, draw on junk mail. Just make sure if you're drawing on something like this, you don't eat what was inside of it, because vegan pizza is terrible. So, our vocabulary words of the day for chapters 3 and 4 are batty, gilded, and Turkish delight. So be listening for those as we read through the story. And remember, if anyone in our area needs help, you can reach out to the food pantry at 503-879-FOOD, or you can reach out for other kinds of help at our support line, 503-879-HELP. So again, be listening for our vocabulary words as we go through the story. And I will try to use as many silly voices as my voice will allow, as today I have brought water. All right, here we go. Chapter 3, Edmund and the Wardrobe. Lucy ran out of the empty room, into the passage, and found the other three. It's all right, she repeated. I've come back. What on earth are you talking about, Lucy? Asked Susan. Why, said Lucy in amazement, haven't you all been wondering where I was? So you've been hiding, haven't you? Said Peter. Poor old Lou. Hiding and nobody noticed. You'll have to hide longer than that if you want people to start looking for you. But I've been away for hours and hours, said Lucy. The others stared at one another. Batty, said Edmund, tapping his head. Quite batty. What do you mean, Lou? Asked Peter. What I said, answered Lucy. It was just after breakfast when I went into the wardrobe, and I've been away for hours and hours and had tea, and all sorts of things have happened. Don't be silly, said Susan. We've only just come out of the room a moment ago, and you were there then. She's not being silly at all, said Peter. She's just making up a story for fun, aren't you, Lou? No, Peter, I'm not, she said. It's a magic wardrobe. There's a wood inside it, and it's snowing, and there's a faun and a witch, and it's called Narnia. Come and see. The others did not know what to think, but Lucy was so excited that they all went back with her into the room. She rushed ahead of them, flung open the door of the wardrobe, and cried, Now go see for yourselves. Why, you goose, said Susan, putting her head inside and pulling the fur coats apart. It's just an ordinary wardrobe. Look, there's the back of it. Then everybody looked in and pulled the coats apart, and they all saw, Lucy herself saw, a perfectly ordinary wardrobe. There was no wood and no snow, only the back of a wardrobe with hooks on it. Peter went in and rapped his knuckles on it to make sure that it was solid. A jolly good hoax, Lou, he said as he came out again. You've really taken us in. I must admit, we half believed you. But it wasn't a hoax at all, said Lucy. Really and truly, it was all a different moment ago. Honestly, it was, I promise. Come, Lou, Peter said. That's going a bit far. You've had your joke. Hadn't you better drop it now? Lucy grew very red in the face and tried to say something, though she hardly knew what she was trying to say, and she burst into tears. For the next few days, she was very miserable. She could have made up with the others quite easily at any moment if she could have brought herself to say that the whole thing was only a story made up for fun. But Lucy was a very truthful girl, and she knew that she was really in the right, and she could not bring herself to say this. The others, who thought she was telling a lie, and a silly lie too, made her very unhappy. The two elder ones did this without meaning to, but Edmund could be spiteful. And on this occasion, he He was spiteful. He sneered and jeered at Lucy and kept on asking if she'd found any other new countries and other cupboards all over the house. What made it worse was that these days ought to have been delightful. The weather was fine. Hey, that's kind of like how it is outside right now. And they should be outdoors from morning to night, bathing, fishing, climbing trees, and lying in the heather. But Lucy could not properly enjoy any of it, so things went on until the next wet day. So remember, they're out at the professor's house because they're fleeing the city from the air raids that are happening, one of our vocab words from yesterday. So it's similar that they have to stay inside, kind of like how I'm staying inside to self-isolate during the COVID-19 outbreak. Anyway, back to the story. After water. See how long I drink. That day, when it came to the afternoon, and there was still no sign of a break in the weather, they decided to play hide and seek. Susan was it. And as soon as the others scattered to hide, Lucy went to the room where the wardrobe was. She did not mean to hide in the wardrobe because she knew that that would only set the others talking again about the whole wretched business. But she did want to have one more look-see inside it. For by this time, she was beginning to wonder herself whether Narnia and the Faun had not been a dream. The house was so large and complicated and full of hidden places that she thought she would have time to have one look into the wardrobe and then hide somewhere else. But as soon as she reached it, she heard steps in the passage outside. And then there was nothing for it but to jump into the wardrobe and hold the door closed behind her. She did not shut it properly because she knew that it is very silly to shut oneself into a wardrobe, even if it's not a magic one. Now the steps she had heard were those of Edmund, and he came into the room just in time to see Lucy vanishing into the wardrobe. He at once decided to get into it himself, not because he thought it was a particularly good idea to hide, but because then he could go on teasing her about her imaginary country. He opened the door. There were the coats hanging up, as usual, and a smell of mothballs and darkness and silence, and no sign of Lucy. "She thinks I'm Susan come to catch her," said Edmund to himself, "and so she's keeping very quiet in at the back." He jumped in and shut the door, forgetting what a very foolish thing that is to do. Then he began feeling about for Lucy in the dark. He had expected to find her in a few seconds and was very surprised when he did not. He decided to open the door again and let in some light, but he could not find the door either. He didn't like this at all, and began groping wildly in every direction. He even shouted, "Lucy! Lou! Where are you? I know you're here!" There was no answer, and Edmund noticed that his own voice had a curious sound. Not the sound you expect in a cupboard, but a kind of open air sound. He also noticed that he was unexpectedly cold, and he saw a light. "Thank goodness," said Edmund. "The door must have swung open all of its own accord." He forgot all about Lucy and went toward the light. Ooh, I wonder what that light's gonna be. Do you remember from last chapter? But instead of finding himself stepping out into the spare room, he found himself stepping out from the shadows of some thick, dark fir trees into an open place in the middle of the woods. There was a crisp, dry snow under his feet, and more snow lying on the branches of the trees. Overhead, there was a pale blue sky. The sort of sky one sees on a fine winter day in the morning. Straight ahead of him, he saw between the tree trunks the sun just rising, very red and clear. Everything was perfectly still, as if he were the only living thing in that country. There was not even a robin or a squirrel among the trees, and the wood stretched as far as he could see in every direction. Ooh, he shivered. He now remembered that he had been looking for Lucy, and also how unpleasant he had been to her about the imaginary country, which now turned out to have not been imaginary at all. He thought that she must be somewhere quite close, so he shouted, "Lucy! Lucy! I'm here too! It's Edmund!" There was no answer. She's still angry about all the things I've been saying lately, thought Edmund. And though he did not like to admit that he had been wrong, he also did not much like being alone in this strange, cold, quiet place. He shouted again, "I say, Lou, I'm sorry I didn't believe you. I see you were right all along. Do come out. Make it Pax." Who really says that? It's like you Pax leaders out there from Willamina. Still, there was no answer. "Just like a girl," said Edmund to himself, "sulking somewhere and won't accept an apology." He looked around again and decided he did not much like this place, and had almost made up his mind to go home when he heard very far off in the wood the sound of bells. He listened, and the sound came nearer and nearer, and at last there was swept into sight a sledge, that's like a sled, drawn by 2 reindeer. The reindeers were about the size of a Shetland pony, and their hair was so white that even the snow hardly looked white compared with them. Their branching horns were gilded and shone like something on fire when the sunrise caught them. Ooh, gilded. That was one of our words. Bum, bum, bum. Their harness was of scarlet leather, that's kind of a red color, and covered with bells. On the sledge, driving the reindeer, sat a fat dwarf, not who you thought it was, who would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing. He was dressed in a polar bear's fur on his head, and he wore a red hood with a long gold tassel hanging down from its point. His huge beard covered his knees and served him instead of a rug, so it was so long his beard was like a blanket. I should do that. And right behind him, on a much higher seat in the middle of the sledge, sat a very, very different person. A great lady, taller than any woman Edmund had ever seen. She was also covered in white fur all the way up to her throat, and held a long, straight, golden wand in her right hand, and wore a golden crown on her head. Her face was white, not merely pale, but white like snow or paper or icing, except for her very red mouth. It was a beautiful face in other respects, but proud and cold and stern. The sledge was a fine sight as it came sweeping toward Edmund, with the bells jingling and the dwarf cracking his whip and the snow flying up on each side of it. "Stop!" said the lady, and the dwarf pulled the reindeer up so sharp that they almost sat down. Then they recovered themselves and stood champing their bits and blowing in the frosty air. The breath coming out of their nostrils looked like smoke. "And what, pray, are you?" said the lady, looking hard at Edmund. My name's Edmund," said Edmund rather awkwardly. He did not really like the way she was looking at him. The lady frowned. "Is that how you address a queen?" she asked, looking sterner than ever. I beg your pardon, your majesty. I didn't know." "Not know the Queen of Narnia?" cried. "Ha! You shall know us better hereafter, but I repeat, what are you?" Please, your majesty," said Edmund. "I don't know what you mean. I'm at school, at least I was. It's the holidays now." That's the end of chapter 3 and the introduction of the White Witch. Jake, are you coming to read with us? Come on. Come on, up here. Come on, Bubs. We're now about to start chapter 4. Come on, over on this side. We have Jake coming to join us. In chapter 4 is Turkish Delight, which is also one of our vocab words. And Turkish Delight is kind of a weird thing. It's kind of a candy, similar to gummy bears. "But what are you?" said the queen. "Not you, Jake." "Are you a great overgrown dwarf that has cut off its beard?" "No, your majesty," said Edmund. "I've never had a beard. I'm a boy." "A boy," said she. "Do you mean you are a son of Adam?" Edmund stood still, saying nothing. He was too confused by this time to understand what the question meant. "I see you are an idiot, whatever else you may be," said the queen, Answer me once and for all, or I shall lose my patience. Are you human? Are you human, Jake? And how, pray, did you come to enter my dominions? Dominions are kind of like kingdoms. Please, your majesty, I came in through the wardrobe. A wardrobe? What do you mean? I opened the door and I found myself here. Your majesty, said Edmund. Ha! Said the queen, speaking more to herself than to him. A door? A door from the world of men. I've heard of such things. This may wreck all, but he is only one, and he is easily dealt with. As she spoke these words, she rose from her seat and looked Edmund full in the face, her eyes flaming. At the same moment, she raised her wand. Edmund felt sure that she was going to do something dreadful, but he seemed unable to move. Then, just as he gave himself up for lost, she appeared to change her mind. Oh, my poor child, she said in a quite different voice. How cold you look. Come and sit with me here on the sledge, and I will put a mantle around you and we will talk. Edmund did not like this arrangement at all, but he dared not disobey. He stepped onto the sledge and sat at her feet, and she put a fold of her fur mantle around him and tucked him well in. That's kind of like a blanket, a mantle, kind of like a scarf. Perhaps something hot to drink, said the queen. Should you like that? Yes, please, your majesty, said Edmund, whose teeth were chattering because it's so cold. The queen took from somewhere among her wrappings a very small bottle, which looked as if it were made of copper. Copper's kind of this guy's color right here. Then, holding out her arm, she let one drop fall onto the snow beside the sledge. Edmund saw the drop for a second in midair, shining like a diamond. But the moment it touched the snow, there was a hissing sound. Sssss. And there stood a jeweled cup full of something that steamed. The dwarf immediately took this and handed it to Edmund with a bow and a smile. Not a very nice smile. Edmund felt much better as he began to sip the hot drink. It was something he had never tasted before. Very sweet and foamy and creamy, and it warmed him right down to his toes. It is dull, son of Adam, to drink without eating, said the queen. What would you like best to eat? What do you want to eat, Jake? Turkish delight, please, your majesty, said Edmund. The queen, bloop, let another drop fall from her bottle onto the snow, and instantly there was a round box tied with a green silk ribbon, which, when opened, turned out to contain several pounds of the best Turkish delight. Ooh, that's one of our vocab words. Each piece was sweet and light to the very center, and Edmund had never tasted something more delicious. He was quite warm now and very comfortable. There's a quick picture of our friend, the dwarf with the long beard. While he was eating, the queen kept asking him questions. At first, Edmund tried to remember that it was rude to speak with a full mouth, but soon he forgot about this and thought only of trying to shovel as much of the Turkish delight as he could into his mouth, and he ate more, and he wanted more to eat, and he never asked himself why the queen should be so inquisitive. She got him to tell her that he had one brother and two sisters, and that one of his sisters had already been in Narnia and had met a faun there, and that no one except himself and his brothers and his sisters knew anything about Narnia. Bye, Jake. She seemed especially interested in the fact that there were 4 of them and kept on coming back to him. You're sure that there are just 4 of you? She asked. 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve, neither more nor less. And Edmund, with his mouth full of Turkish delight, yes, that's what I told you, Majesty. But he kept forgetting to call her Your Majesty, but, she didn't really seem to mind now. At last, the Turkish delight was all finished, and Edmund was looking very hard at the empty box and wishing that she could ask him whether he would like some more. Probably the queen knew quite well what he was thinking, for she knew, though Edmund did not, that this was enchanted, that means magical, Turkish delight, and that anyone who had once tasted it would want more and more of it. And would even, if they were allowed, go on eating it and eating it and eating it until they killed themselves. But she did not offer him any more. Instead, she said to him, "Son of Adam, I should so much like to meet your brother and your two sisters. Will you bring them to see me?" I'll try, said Edmund, still looking at the empty box. "Because if you come again, bringing them with you, of course, I'll be able to give you some more Turkish delight. I can't do it now. The magic will only work once. In my own house, it would be another matter." Well, why can't we go to your house now?" said Edmund. "Don't go with strangers, kids. You know better." When he had first got onto the sledge, he had been afraid that she might drive away with him to some unknown place from which he would not be able to get back. But he had forgotten about that fear now. "It is such a lovely place, my house," said the Queen. "I am sure you would like it. There are whole rooms full of Turkish delight, and what's more, I have no children of my own. I want a nice boy whom I could bring up as a prince, and who would be king of Narnia when I am gone. While he was prince, he would wear a gold crown and eat Turkish delight all day long. And you are much the cleverest and handsomest young man I've ever met. I think I would like to make you prince someday, when you bring the others to visit me." "Why not now?" said Edmund. His face had become very red, and his mouth and fingers were sticky. He did not look either clever or handsome, whatever the Queen might say. "Oh, but if I took you there now," she said, "I shouldn't see your brothers and sisters. I very much want to know your charming relations. You are to be prince and later on the king. That is understood, but you must have courtiers and nobles. I will make your brother a duke and your sisters duchesses." "There's nothing special about them," said Edmund. "And anyway, I could always bring them some other time." But once you're at my house," said the Queen, "you might forget all about them. You would be enjoying yourself so much that you wouldn't want the bother of going to fetch them. No, you must go back to your own country, now, and come to me another day, with them. You understand? It is no good coming without them." But I don't even know my way back to my own country," pleaded Edmund. "Oh, that's easy," answered the Queen. "Do you see the lamp?" She pointed with her wand, and Edmund turned and saw the same lamppost under which Lucy had met the fawn. "Straight on beyond that is the way to the world of men, and now look the other way." Here she pointed in the opposite direction. "And tell me if you can see the two little hills rising above the trees." "I think I can," said Edmund. "And by the way," said the Queen, you needn't tell them about me. It would be fun to keep it a secret between us two, wouldn't it? Make it a surprise for them. Just bring them along to the two hills. A clever boy like you will easily think of something excuse to do that. And when you come to my house, you could just say, 'Let's see who lives here,' or something like that. I'm sure that would be best. Yes, if your sister has met one of the fawns, she may have heard strange stories about me." "Nasty stories." "That might make her afraid to come see me. Fawns will say anything, you know. And now—" Please, said Edmund suddenly. "Please, couldn't I just have one piece of Turkish delight to eat on my way home?" No, said the Queen with a laugh. "You must wait till next time." While she spoke, she signaled to the dwarf to drive on. But as the sledge swept away out of sight, the Queen waved to Edmund, calling out, Next time! Don't forget! Come soon!" Edmund was still staring after the sledge when he heard someone calling his own name, and looking around, he saw Lucy coming toward him from the other part of the wood. "Oh, Edmund!" she cried. So you've got in too. Isn't it wonderful? And now—" "All right," said Edmund. "I see you were right, and it is a magic wardrobe after all. I'll say I'm sorry if you like. But where on earth have you been all this time? I've been looking everywhere for you." "Well, if I'd known you had gotten in too, I'd have waited for you," said Lucy, who was too happy and excited to notice how snappishly Edmund spoke, or how flushed and strange his face was. I've been having lunch with dear Mr. Tumnus the Fawn, and he's very well, and the White Witch has done nothing to him for letting him go, or letting me go. So he thinks she can't have found out, and perhaps everything is going to be okay after all." "The White Witch?" said Edmund. Who's she?" "She is a perfectly terrible person," said Lucy. "She calls herself the Queen of Narnia, though she has no right to be queen at all, and all the fauns and dryads and naiads and dwarfs and animals, at least all the good ones, simply hate her. And she can turn people into stone and do all kinds of horrible things. And she made a magic so that it is always winter in Narnia. Always winter. But it never gets to Christmas. And she drives about on a sledge drawn by a reindeer with her wand in her hand and a crown on her head." Edmund was already feeling uncomfortable from having eaten too many sweets, and when she heard that the lady she had made friends with, the one that gave him all the Turkish delight, was a dangerous witch, he felt more uncomfortable. But he still wanted to taste that Turkish delight again, more than he wanted anything else. Who told you all that stuff about the White Witch?" he asked. "Mr. Tumnus the Fawn," said Lucy. "You can't always believe what fawns say," said Edmund, trying to sound as if he knew far more than Lucy. "Whoever said so?" asked Lucy. Everyone knows it," said Esmond. "Ask anybody you like, but it's pretty poor sport, standing here in the snow. Let's go home." Yes, let's," said Lucy. "Oh, Edmund, I'm glad you've gotten too. The others will have to believe in Narnia now that both of us have been there. What fun it will be!" But Edmund secretly thought it would not be good fun for him, as fun as it was for her. He would have to admit that Lucy had been right in front of all the others, and he felt sure the others would all be on the side of the fawns and the animals. But he was already more than half on the side of the witch, but he didn't know what he would say or how he would keep his secret once they were all talking about Narnia. By this time they had walked a good way. Then suddenly they felt the coats around them instead of the branches, and the next moment they were both standing outside the wardrobe in the empty room. "I say," said Lucy, "you do look awful, Edmund. Don't you feel well?" "I'm all right," said Edmund, but this was not true. He was feeling very sick. "Come on then," said Lucy. "Let's find the others. What a lot we have to tell them, and what a wonderful adventures we shall have now that we're all in it together." All right, that's the end of the chapter. So just a reminder that my email address, george.newyear@grandron.org, is somewhere around here. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you guys would like, with your parents, you can send a sentence in with one of these vocabulary words. We had the word batty, which is kind of like crazy. We have gilded, which is kind of like covered with a thin layer of gold. And we had Turkish delight, which is a kind of sweet, the one that the White Witch is using to mess with Edmund. So, after we read today's story, here's a couple of questions to talk about with your people. What did they find when they looked into the wardrobe? This one should be pretty easy if you were listening, but I know you guys. Number 2, why do you think Lucy had begun to wonder whether Narnia had been a dream? Number 3, why do you think the Queen changed from being really mean and angry and then started being kind of caring and giving stuff to Edmund? So, those are some things to think about. You can talk about those with your parents or your friends or your family or yourself if you would like. Remember, you can send in pictures of Jake of the Day or some kind of confirmation that you did today's lesson. And feel free to send me any comments about the length of the video, whether you can hear me, whether there's a booger hanging from my nose, or anything like that. Anyway, stay home, stay safe, save lives. Remember to wash your hands a lot, stay away from everyone, and Afki Pasalda, Hayamasi Paschagu Masaga.